This week on the Hall of Very Good podcast, from the Dock Ellis Foundation, it's Hjordis and Jasmine Lee Ellis. Insert stupid quote here, because I'm Lou Olson.
And I'm Sean Anderson. The Hall of Very Good podcast starts right after this.
What if you could own a part of history? What if you could be a part of history? Whether you're 9 months old or 90, Team Brown Apparel has something for you. Team Brown Apparel offers officially licensed merchandise from the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. With such iconic brands as the Kansas City Monarchs, Homestead Grays, and Chicago American Giants, Team Brown Apparel brings the Negro Leagues back to life. We carry shirts for infants through adults, including a special women's collection. And get this, all shirts are tagless for your comfort. What's even better is a portion of all sales goes to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, so you are not only wearing history, but you're supporting it as well. Team Brown Apparel's mission is not only to put you in the finest apparel, but to bring history to life. As a special gift for the listeners of the Hall of Very Good podcast, you can save 25% off on all orders. Go to teambrownapparel.com and enter the promo code HOVG at checkout. That's teambrownapparel.com and enter the code HOVG for 25% off. Team Brown Apparel, history in your size.
We can't talk Dock Ellis without hearing about all the Dock Ellis stuff, but you know what I want to ask about first is, because we're talking to the wife and daughter of Dock Ellis, what do we need to know before we get into the other Dock Ellis stuff? What do we need to know about Dock the husband and Dock the dad? We don't hear about that a lot.
No, you don't. Dock the husband was a phenomenal man. I met Doc. Doc and I met as friends, and he transitioned and left this world as my best friend and my hero. He was, I couldn't have gotten a better guy. I really couldn't, and it's been a long, hard road for me these last 10 years, having to adjust without him. Really, it has.
And when did you meet Doc, and when did you guys get married?
I first initially met Doc in 1984. He came to my mother's house to do a intervention on two of my younger sisters who at the time were in having issues with substance abuse.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I initially met him.
That's a very high stress first meeting. Like that's a very intense first meeting. So like what struck you about him? Was it his assertiveness? Was it his gentle nature? Because that's a high stress situation to first meet someone in.
You know, when he walked through the door at my mother's home, as I said, he was there to do an intervention on two of my younger sisters. My mother had just had a 9-way heart bypass, so I was at the house checking on her. And when he walked through the door, I didn't have a clue who this man was, but the first response out of my mouth to my mom was, "That's going to be my husband." And she just laughed. She was like, "You are so funny." and it ended up being that way. Like I said, I initially met him in 84. I made him chase me for a while, for a couple of years. And Doc and I, after we had our first initial date, we had been together from that day until the day he took his last breath. We actually married in 1992 in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. McBean was his best man. McBean and another friend of his in the Virgin Islands, and McBean's wife was my maid of honor. And no one knew we were getting married.
Oh, wow.
But you guys knew. On everybody. You guys knew you were going off to elope. You were going off to get married. It wasn't just something that happened spur of the moment?
No, it did not happen spur of the moment. Doc had gone to L.A. to visit his mom because at the time we were living in Arizona. And he came back home and he walked in the door and he said, "Hjordi," he said, "I went to the cemetery to visit my dad for the first time since he's passed." And I said, "Wow." He said, "But guess what?" And I said, "What?" He said, "He told me I had to come home and ask you to marry me. You're the one." He said, "So you need to pack a bag because in 2 weeks we're leaving to get married." We didn't even take the kids with us.
No, they didn't take us.
Nope. No go. Look, if it makes you feel any better, I heard it was a bad time. I heard that nobody had any fun, and the food was terrible, and the hotel wasn't any good.
It was one of the best times of my life. We got
Oh,
married.
crap.
Don't let Jasmine know that.
You blew my cover. I was like, yeah, you blew my cover.
Well, let me let you know, because they didn't take us, we had a house party, and when they came home, we were in so much trouble because the house was destroyed.
But Jasmine, was it worth it? Was it worth it?
Listen, the punishment that we got, it was not worth it. I think we were on punishment for it until we were 18 years. I was 18.
Oh, all right. Okay, well, at least you know now. All right, one and done.
Lesson learned.
Yes, but he was a great husband, and he was an even better friend, and he was the father of all fathers, is what I can say. Mm-hmm. My daughter was not Doc's biological daughter. I had her when we met, but from the moment that we began dating, the agreement was that we were a package deal. That was his agreement. That just like he accepted me and wanted me in his life, he was doing the same with my child. And from that day forward, the only way that he looked at her as his daughter, and he would not have it any other way.
So, Jasmine, Doc the dad, what can you tell us? And you can't just say Mom hit all of it.
Right. Well, yeah, kind of she did. But, I mean, being the fact that he came into my life, I was 2 years old when he came into my life. And, I mean, I didn't know any difference. That was my dad. That's who I knew. That's all I knew. So, everything that he stood for is what he installed in me. So it's, there was never a beat. I don't look at him as a stepfather. I don't look at him as I'm adopted. That's my dad. I was there when he took his last breath. I didn't really participate in a lot of the baseball things because to me, he wasn't a baseball player. It was my dad. So a lot of times when people ask questions about him and playing baseball, it's kind of like, well, let me Google it really quick.
There you go. Sure.
Well, yeah, because, you were born, a few years after Doc was done pitching anyway. So it would make sense that you wouldn't have any memories because you weren't born yet. So no, it makes perfect sense. But at what point do you start learning what a character, and I use air quotes like you guys can see it, a character that Doc was on the diamond, and then some of the stories that get passed around, true or not true, or good, bad, or indifferent. When do you start learning those? Does he tell you? Do you stumble upon them, or do people tell you?
Well, it's funny because I would hear people call. I would hear him talk on the phone. I would hear stories of baseball, but I don't think it really sat in for me until 1996 when I went to the All-Star Weekend. That was the first event that I had ever went to with him. Throughout the years, being younger, he would invite me, and of course you're a kid, so you're like, no, I want to go hang out with my friends.
Sure.
And he's, like, yes, you don't know what you're missing. You need to get here and meet these people because one day I'm not going to be here. You need to be able to meet and greet them and say hi so they know who you are. And I'm looking like, no, that's not important to me. What's important is going to play Barbies. So, in 1996, when he asked me, it was more of a ask tell, like, you're going to go with me because I need you to be able to grace these people's present. I need you to be able to know who they are and them know who you are. So that is when it was like, wow, when I saw the people in line, they wanted his autographs, the interviews. I got to sit in on an interview that he did. I believe it was with ESPN. And then at that moment, that was my aha moment, like, wow, this is my dad? Okay. I didn't know you had it in you. But, we didn't, because, growing up in the household, it wasn't baseball. What I grew up around was being around children who parents were in the system or whose parents were on drugs or they were on drugs. And those were the missions that I went on with him. Those were the things where it wasn't an ask, you're going to go because I need you to be able to experience this. So that's what I know him as. That's what I knew him as. I didn't know the baseball friends. I knew the friends that were the inmates or the friends who were drug and alcohol counselors or people that were in the field that he was in at that time. I didn't know anything about baseball or the baseball friends. And honestly, right now, I don't know many of them. So, that's just what I know is my dad, the man who saved lives.
Yeah, well, because he really, and Hjordis, you can, say, yep, you're right. I mean, he really there was his life up until a point, boom, and then it was like a whole different, not a career, but a whole different path. Which that's if people, if they know the story of Dock Ellis, that's what they know. Not just
Right.
Oh, he wore hair curlers out on the field, or
Right.
threw a no hitter.
Right. Right. And even like Jasmine was saying, even for me, when I met Doc was just ending. He had just went in or had been in retirement for maybe about, he had been in there a few years when he and I met. So he was already full blown into the whole working in the prison system and working with the California Youth Authority, and he was in school, and then I ended up going to school. He and I both were substance abuse counselors. Then Jasmine ended up following right behind us, and she was in school just getting ready to get her certification. And we all have the same professors. We all went to school at different times, but we ended up with the same exact professors all the way through school. And Jasmine was just getting ready to graduate. Matter of fact, when we found out that Doc was ill. But like she said, in our home, and I was with Doc for almost 26 years between dating and our marriage, and baseball just wasn't really something that was big in our household. He did the autograph shows like she did. She said he would do some of the all-time games. The most memory that I have of Doc on a baseball field is when he played in the old-timers league on the Pelicans. That's when I got to see him actually on the field pitching a ball. That's the extent of what I know of him in baseball outside of the stories that he has shared with us or the interviews that we've watched that he did over the years.
And so you went to St. Petersburg when he played for the Pelicans. Did you go as a family, or did you just visit?
No, we only went to visit when he played for the Pelicans. I would go down there and stay for a couple of weeks at a time, and then sometimes we would bring the kids with us. And then shortly after he stopped playing for the Pelicans, we moved to Florida for a while, and he worked as a substance abuse counselor there in Sarasota, Florida. And that's all Doc knew. That was Doc's life. I tell people all the time, if you take the years that he played in Major League Baseball and then you take his bio and look at all the other years of his life after baseball, his time working, helping people far outweighed the years that he spent playing Major League Baseball. And baseball was one of his callings, but his true calling was working with people. That's who Doc was. That's truly who he was. From every aspect of his being, that is who Doc Philip Ellis Jr. was.
Oh yeah, it's certainly that. It just listening to you talk. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like that was his calling. Well, okay. So tell us about, and Jasmine, you and I had messaged back and forth a little bit about, there was the movie that everybody read about a couple of years ago that Ice Cube and his son were attached to, but now it's gone in a different direction. What's the status of, is it called LSD? Is it still, ELLISD? Is it still called that?
It is. So basically right now what it is Columbus Short actually has the rights, and the movie is going to be called LSD. We're not really aware of how the situation came about with Ice Cube getting involved with the movie. It was more on the lines of, after we found out about it, we actually had a few bloggers contacted us. And at that point, that's when we discussed the fact that we had never even given the rights over to Ice Cube, and we had never been contacted about it. So once the article came out and we let it be known that we were not behind it, it wasn't that we didn't support it. It was just more on the lines that I felt that if this is what you were going to do, then the person that you should be speaking to should be my mother, because that is who would be able to give you what you need to be able to go forward with making the movie. And he never reached out, he never contacted us, and next thing you know, he just kind of backed away from doing the movie. So I'm assuming that it's because of the article that came out. And my mom can kind of go into the details of how her and Columbus were able to speak and how that whole thing came into place.
All right. Well, Jasmine put the ball on the tee for you. So
I'm going to get her after this guy.
Let's hear it.
No, I told Jasmine, I inherit a lot of Doc's ways, and I'm just a real straightforward person. Over the last 9 years, 10 years that Doc has been gone, I've had probably 15 different individuals that have come to me with different movie ideas on Doc. I've been open with everyone. I've given everyone the opportunity. The only agreement that I've made with everyone is that the story cannot be based solely on Doc pitching a no-hitter on LSD. That story has been told a million times over. We all know it going and coming. It's time for people to know who this man really is, or who he really was. Let's talk about his legacy. Let's talk about the real man. And Columbus Short came to me honestly, and we went and we sat down and we talked a long, long time about this. And at that point is when I told him that I would grant him the right to Doc's name in order. I'm going to give him 2 years to try to get everything in line with the financing or whatever. But I even went as far as reaching out to Ice Cube. I wrote him I had his direct phone number. It was given to me as well as address. And I reached out to him several times because I really did want to talk to him, because this is the ironic thing that I'm getting ready to share with you. On Doc's deathbed, one of his dying wishes were that if there was ever to be a movie made about him, Ice Cube is who he wanted to play his character.
Really?
Nice. It's good casting.
That is the honest truth. And anyone that was with Doc when he was dying would share the same story with you. So when I saw this by way of social media, that he was getting ready to do this movie on Doc, I'm like, but wait a minute. How is this going on? And I haven't even spoken to this man. I have the life rights. And I reached out to him twice, and there was never any response. So at that point, I left it alone. And that's when I picked up with Columbus Short.
Huh. And do we know do we know where Columbus is in the process? I'm sorry, you might have, Jasmine, I think you might have touched upon that. Do we know where he's at in the process?
And right now in the process, I know that he is still waiting on word for some what he tells me is financing or individuals that he's trying to get to help to back the production of the movie or the filming of the story for him. He does stay in pretty constant contact with me because, matter of fact, he's been helping us a lot with different things with the organization. But we all agreed. We know it was going to be a slow process. It was, it was nothing I was rushing or wanting him to rush doing. My only agreement with him was that he had to make sure that the movie was not solely based on Doc pitching a no-hitter on LSD. I won't have it. That's just the bottom line. I'm not.
Yeah, if anything, let's do a movie on those the all African American and Latino, that 1971 lineup that the Pirates put out. That's what I'd like
Exactly.
That'd be a good movie. That'd be a good movie. That's one of the greatest baseball teams ever assembled.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be a good one. Hey, did he ever talk about Roberto Clemente? Did Doc ever talk about his time with Clemente at all?
I tell everybody that the most I ever seen Doc actually openly share his feelings and talk about Roberto Clemente
Mhm.
is after he was told that he was dying. Is when he was able to finally open up and talk
Mhm.
about how much it had affected his life and a lot of the anger and resentment that he had carried around for years. A lot of why his addiction to drugs and alcohol went as far as it did go. And a lot of it is because he was covering up the pain from the loss of Roberto Clemente, who he looked at as a brother.
Mhm.
That is how he saw. But over the years in our home, no. Roberto Clemente, he would talk about any and everything, but as soon as somebody would bring up Roberto Clemente, he would immediately let them know that conversation is off limits. We do not talk about that in this house, and we didn't.
Wow. I had no idea about that before I asked. I swear that was not like a setup. Our listeners might think that I set that up. I swear I didn't know before that story was told.
I believe you. Believe me, I believe you. And a lot of people, when I share that with them, it's like now I get it, because I've had people say, I can remember there was a time when I tried to ask Doc a question about Roberto Clemente, and he just turned and walked away from me. And I said, it just was a sore subject with him. It was, it affected him deeply, and it was easier for him not to talk about it than it was for him to talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. 100%. We had Manny Sanguillen on not too long ago, and he speaks very openly about it, which is almost jarring. He's very open about it, and you wouldn't expect him to be. Yeah, Manny's very open about his relationship with Roberto and that day, and man, I mean, he's very open. Bless his heart.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I spoke to Manny about maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and I hadn't spoken to Manny in a while, so we were laughing because Manny is one of my favorites out of all the guys. And he said, it's really weird. He said, Hjordis, he said, Docky could not talk about Clemente, Roberto, and I talking about him all the time.
That's very accurate, yeah. He's pretty spot on.
Well, and now, so here, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said, and we both were just cracking up because he told the truth. Doc wouldn't talk about him at all, and Manny doesn't stop talking about him.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said. The effect that Clemente's death had on Doc is years and years and years ago, before the podcast, just for the website, I had talked to Steve Blass, who also was on those Pirates teams, and I want to say that credit's the wrong word, but when he developed the yips was shortly after he was affected, by Clemente's death as well. So that's just
that group of guys, when they did that whole the We Are Family theme for them and everything, it was like for them at that point they were signifying to one another. That's how they looked at each other, as really family, as brothers. Bobby Bonds, Roberto, Al Oliver, Scoop, as they called them, all of those guys really, and it was like when Doc would talk about that group of guys, he would just be overjoyed. He really would, it would just be, and I can remember when, he realized that he was dying and that he was going to die. And, his whole thing was he just needed to know that if he had wronged any of those guys, he wanted them all to know that he was sorry and that he really, truly loved them, and that was just, I can't even describe it. It was very humbling for me to see him become so humble. because everybody had this image of Dock Ellis, this militant man, this angry, bitter man, this man that just didn't, and he was totally the opposite.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like that at all after talking to you.
No, he was a teddy bear. If you we used to tell him, don't get too close to the fire, you're going to melt. He was just a big teddy bear. Our family and our life, we had our ups and downs like any other average family. But the bottom line is that our home was filled with utter love and joy up until the day he took his last breath.
Well, they did call us the Black Osbournes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The Black Osbournes?
Yeah, we were being the Black Osbournes.
Out of the Park Baseball puts you in charge of your favorite Major League Baseball franchise as you guide it through unlimited seasons of championship chasing. Trade players, sign free agents, draft prospects, set lineups and pitching assignments, call the shots from the dugout, and much more. If GMs and managers can do it in real life, you can do it in Out of the Park Baseball. Out of the Park Baseball also features historical play, online leagues, tons of customization options, and much more. So get hired as a virtual GM today.
All right. So anybody who just hears the name Dock Ellis, like I mentioned before, there's certain things that they think, but this is the good stuff. You guys are keeping. Tell us how you're keeping his name and his legacy. Tell us about the Dock Ellis Foundation. That's what we really want to hear about. I mean, it's the other stories are cool, ladies, but tell us about the foundation.
Well, the Dock Ellis Foundation, the way it actually came to be is on Doc's deathbed, when he was told that he only had 6 months left to live. Jasmine, myself, and one of my sisters, he called us in the room, and this is what he asked us. This was his dream, that he wanted us to do whatever we could with any means necessary is to get this nonprofit organization going where we could continue to reach out and help individuals processing out of the prison system, the homeless people on the streets, the woman or the man or the child that's being abused. This is what Doc lived for, and we promised him that we would do anything in our power to try to get this organization started. And for the last 2.5, almost 3 years now, Jasmine and I have been, we've been doing anything and everything we could to try to bring this to light, to let everyone know, we're here. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we want to do. And it's all in honor and love and in memory of Doc, because really this started out, this was Doc's dream. This was his vision, rather. And all we're doing is trying to fulfill his vision, because we know this is who he was. And if he was still living today, this is what we would be doing.
Right. And so basically, like my mom was saying, originally the Dock Ellis Foundation, it started out with helping inmates and basically getting them together with their children and being able to, the purpose was to open up a halfway house and reunite them with their children. Well, when we moved to Las Vegas, in the process of being in Las Vegas, I had the opportunity of working for a safe house for domestic violence out here. And it came to our attention that Las Vegas actually ranks in the top 5 and has consistently over the years with domestic violence, homicides, and sex trafficking. So over the last 2 years, what we've been doing is we've actually been partnering with a couple of organizations, helping find children who have been missing, who are being sex trafficked on the strip or on the streets. We've been able to relocate. Just 2 weeks ago, we actually were able to bring home 13 young girls who were being sex trafficked. And right now what we're doing is the focus is assisting victims who are fleeing from their abusers. So we have a 1-800 hotline that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can call at any time as soon as they call us. If they need to be relocated, at that point, we will relocate them to a motel or a hotel or a safe house that's available. We provide them with all new clothing. We provide them with clothes. We just had a young lady that we were able to transition into an apartment. So we're getting ready to give her a bed and clothing and plates and dishes and things like that, because what we've noticed is it's very hard for them to flee when they don't have the resources available. So that's basically what the organization stands for and what we're doing.
And how can people help? Anybody who's listening right now, how can they help?
Well, the best way for people to help right now is honestly donations. We were blessed with a donation yesterday with over 600 pieces of children's clothing, and literally as soon as we received them, it was going out the door. We need the funding to be able to put these women in the hotels. Right now we're paying about $700 just to put a family in a hotel for 14 days. So we need monetary donations. That's what people can do if they really want to help us to keep the mission going.
And is it so? I'll just so that I put the right thing up in our show notes. It's the I'm looking at a link here online that is a PayPal link for donate to the Dock Ellis Foundation. Is that what we can do? People can type in how much they want, sign in with their PayPal, and shoot you a donation?
That's exactly what they can do. And again, we are 501c3, so it is tax deductible. So they can go to that link. They can donate whatever they want. We'll take $1. We'll take whatever it is that they want to donate, because again, it's going to be able to help put these families in some type of a safe environment to remove them, because again, it's an alarming amount of victims who are being killed on a daily basis in Las Vegas over domestic violence.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
this has been
sharing
wonderful.
all of this. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to get into, but this ended up, I think, is... I love this conversation. I appreciate you guys so much. Jasmine being tenacious and making sure that we made this happen. So thank you so much, ladies.
No, thank you so much, really. We really do appreciate it. It means so much to us because just like you all wanted to hear and ask us questions, it gave us the opportunity. You gave us the platform to let those that are listening know that this is something very near and dear, not only to us, but to the legacy of Dock Ellis, really, the true man. And we do thank you. And don't worry, there'll be more to follow, because I am going to be writing that #1 bestseller here real soon.
Oh,
also.
Okay. Well, then don't forget us.
Oh, I sure will.
Yeah. Thank you to our guest this week. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can find me on the Twitter at Lucifer Olsen. That's L-O-U-C as in cat, IFEROLSEN. Sean, where can the people find you?
Thanks, Lou. You can find me on Twitter at HOVG. You can access the show notes and other great content online over at hallofverygood.com. And as always, please remember to rate and review the podcast you just listened to so we can continue bringing you outstanding guests.
Later, boners.